Hello, fifth grade. Ready for part 2 of talking about photosynthesis and the carbon cycle today. So remember from Tuesday, we had sunlight, carbon dioxide, which is a carbon molecule or carbon atom with two oxygens attached to it, and water, which is absorbed through the vascular tissue inside the plant, travels up through the leaf. And in the leaf, we have this amazing chemical reaction happening. Where carbon and sunlight and water come together. There's always an energy source or like a catalyst, something that's creating that chemical reaction, which is the sunlight mixing with the carbon and the water. And from that, we get oxygen. Oxygen is the oxygen we breathe is O2, so it's two oxygen molecules, atoms, whichever word you want to use. This is a molecule with two atoms attached. And then sugar. And in the sugar, the case that we're talking about is glucose, which is what the plants produce. It's the sugar that we use. We eat. Our bodies need glucose in order to create energy and to have our food and for us to grow in our cells, which you will learn in middle school biology. It's called cellular respiration. It's how we transport glucose into energy. So what we're going to do today is we're going to do the second half of our paper. Technically, the 2/3 of our paper. Let's remember our fractions. So your top is done. Look how lovely that looks from afar. Isn't that beautiful? And now we're going to do photosynthesis. We're going to do a diagram of photosynthesis. And the diagram that we're going to do is going to follow very much like that leaf cutout diagram. And we're going to talk about the carbon cycle and how carbon is transport around Earth and around the planet, which is important to keep in mind because we do always hear about carbon, global warming, and emissions, and the amount of carbon in the planet and the amount of carbon in the planet and the effects it has on our ecosystems. We're talking about ecosystem restoration. Well, we need to restore our ecosystems. We need to have trees so they can produce more oxygen. But the other part of that is thinking of, okay, all the carbon in the planet, how are we producing so much more of it or releasing it technically? Because a lot of it is stored carbon. So we're going to talk about that and draw a little diagram. All right, same things you need: markers, crayons, color pencils, whatever coloring instruments. I'll be doing everything in pencil and then I'll trace over it in marker afterwards. You get to see what it looks like. All right, my friends. All right, so we're going to start with photosynthesis. Photo, we've had this as a spelling. Photo means light. And synthesis, change, so change with light, changing the light. All right, so photosynthesis starts in our tree. We draw our little vascular tree over here before I do anything else. Let's draw the bottom. Find your crease and the bottom folds. Just go a little more so I have more room. So we have our tree. There's our tree. We have our powerhouse for our planet, sun. And within this tree, one little leaf, right? And we're going to show what happens inside that one little leaf. practice cursive. Energy comes from the sun, and when we color, we'll put sun rays in our energy. All right, so when we talk about photosynthesis, we're talking about a chemical reaction. And a chemical reaction, in high school, you'll start doing chemistry. You're going to learn about chemical equations, which is pretty much chemistry is really just like a science class, but instead of doing science, you're just doing a whole lot of math. So much fun. I loved high school chemistry. So, what is the chemical equation? The chemical equation for photosynthesis is the number 6 molecules of water. H2O, right? H2O? Hell no. H2O, right? Water. 2 hydrogen molecules attached to an oxygen molecule. You need 6 of those molecules, right? And those are coming from the roots, right? That's coming up the plant, entering through the xylem, and then it transports into the chloroplast, right? Plants go through this process of fusion where they bring things in and out of their cell walls. So we have 6 water molecules, H2O. If we want to write this in, I guess we'll just write it in underneath. Water. We have carbon dioxide. So carbon dioxide, 6 molecules of carbon dioxide. When you take your high school chemistry class, you learn to balance equations, to learn how the chemical reactions change and all the numbers move around. It's a lot of fun math. And this is carbon dioxide. Right? CO2. Emissions, CO2. We have our light energy. So whenever we have a chemical reaction, there's always this arrow, right? We don't really do necessarily an equal sign. We do an arrow to show that there is a chemical reaction. Our energy, right? Our catalyst, this is our change. Energy from the sun, and we get products. Technically 2 byproducts, but there's a third that we'll talk about after. So the first product we get is sugar. Sugar. So sugar, and this sugar, this sugar is called glucose. Very important. We need glucose. Glucose. That's Glucose. Cose. All sugars are going to have cose in it. Sucrose, saccharose. Okay. Glucose. If you ever want to look at the ingredients, see what sugars are in your food. All right. So the chemical equation for glucose is 6 carbon molecules. 12 hydrogen molecules, and 6 oxygen molecules. So the molecule of glucose has 6 carbon atoms, 12 hydrogen atoms, and 6 oxygen atoms, and that makes a glucose molecule, 1 glucose. We also get oxygen. We get 6 oxygen molecules. And we get water vapor. And water vapor, yes, it's H2O, but because it's condensed and it's like, I don't say the steam, but it's, the condensation or the process is called transpiration, but that water vapor is released. But it's not an actual molecule, like an actual water droplet molecule going up the plant. All right, so this is our chemical equation for photosynthesis. Now we're going to draw this on our paper. And I really like that version. Mine's a little cuter. All right, so first thing we're going to do, and I'm going to use this in pencil first, is we have this leaf, right? Our tiny little leaf on our big beautiful tree. So I'm just going to draw a much larger version of our leaf. All right. Extra tail on that. All right, now we have the vein. And we know that in the vein is of the leaf, it brings water from the roots, right? Through xylem. So our water travels and I'm actually going to draw this vein all the way through because we know the vein of the plant goes all the way. I know I said I was going to color later. I'm not really following my own directions, but it's good for me to know my outline I'm working with. All right, so we have our water, and our water comes in through our leaf, through the vein. All right, so we have our water entering our plant. We have the sunlight energy, and we'll be bringing that through the top of our plant after we color it through. Now, water is 6 molecules of water. So the molecule of water is H2O. So it's an oxygen molecule. And I'm going to use red for my oxygen. So I'm going to draw 6 molecules of water. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So we have 6 molecules of water. There are 2 hydrogen. So H2O is 2 hydrogen attached to an oxygen. So my hydrogen of my water, draw our little atoms. And again, when you get into chemistry, you'll learn the structure of molecules and how atoms attach. I'm not getting into that right now, but if you Google H2O, you'll know that it looks something like that, right? These are little 2 hydrogens attached to each oxygen. Let me do this, maybe. That kind of helps, Mr. Maybe. Make it a little bigger. Okay, so you can see a little clearer. There we go. All right, camera adjust. All right, so we have the H2O. Now we're going to do our carbon. Now the carbon dioxide comes through the stomata. So the stomata of our leaf is on the underside, right? So we're going to have our little stomata holes on the underside of our leaf. So we have our stomata. It's where gases are exchanged. And in comes carbon dioxide. So our carbon dioxide comes in. Our carbon dioxide comes in, and carbon dioxide is CO2. So we have 6 carbon molecules. So I'm going to, again, do my 6. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Now, of course, not just 6 little, the stomata aren't just letting 6 little molecules come in, but we're understanding the idea that all the air is coming through, but photosynthesis doesn't occur inside the chloroplast until it absorbs, like it takes 6 of these molecules for the reaction to occur. So CO2, right? So 2 oxygen. So just like how we did 2 hydrogen to the oxygen, we're going to do 2 oxygen to our carbon. I just realized I'm making mine really small. Please feel free to use more space of your paper. All right, so we have 6 CO2. We have our sunlight energy, and then we get 6 carbon with 6 oxygen, or no, 6 oxygens and 12 hydrogens. So we're going to draw a glucose chain. So the glucose we're actually going to keep in the leaf, right? Because the glucose stays in the leaf or in the plant and is stored. So we're going to draw our glucose product. And I'm going to draw it right here. And the glucose gets stored right? And it goes through our vascular phloem or vascular tissue. All right, glucose. So we're going to draw our glucose. So we have 6 carbon. So I'm going to get my blue for my carbon, and we're going to draw a glucose chain. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And it's not the most accurate picture of a glucose. It has 12 hydrogen attached. And actually, before I do that, I'm going to draw the oxygen because it has 6 oxygen, which are attached to the carbon. The spacing isn't... 6, okay. And then the hydrogen, that should have been a little bit closer. That's too big of a space. But whatever, you get the idea. There's 12 hydrogen. So there's a hydrogen connecting. Some of these are not the right size, so I drew that too far apart. Whatever, you get the idea. Some big old hydrogen right there. The hydrogen connects the oxygen, or I'm sorry, the carbon atoms, and then there is also a hydrogen attached to each. This is not necessarily 3-dimensional, but you get the idea. So that is our glucose. We have 6 carbon, 12 hydrogen, and 6 oxygen. So that's our glucose. It travels through the phloem after it's produced and is stored in the plant. When a primary consumer eats the plant, this matter, this energy, this is the stored energy of the plant. This is the matter that they're absorbing. They're absorbing the glucose. This is what we need for cellular respiration. So this is what we're getting from it, our nutrients. Now, we also get oxygen. The oxygen escapes the plants through the stomata, or is released. Escape is like it's trapped. And oxygen is O2. So it's 2 oxygen atoms, right? So there's one oxygen, there's six of them. One, two, right? O2, two oxygen combined is it's four, five, and six. Now, what also is released is water. Oops, my paper's cut off here. Water vapor. So we're going to also show our water vapor coming out of our stomata, and this is through transpiration. So in parentheses, I'm just going to put transpiration. Spur, root word, to breathe, right? Transpiration process of the plant's going to plant exhaling, so to speak, and that's water vapor. All right, so we're going to finish, and then we have our sun energy. So, oh, it needs to be darker. It's like red. Maybe like a dark orange, that would probably work better. So we have stored energy, and we have a sun. The plant is absorbing the sun energy. All right, so I'm going to finish coloring this, erasing it, and I'll show you the finished product when we are done. All right, so our finished photosynthesis, we have our there. Wow, that makes a huge difference. All right, so we have our plant leaf and showing where exactly everything occurs. Now, the next thing we're going to talk about is the carbon cycle, the oxygen and carbon cycle. All right, so our oxygen and carbon cycle starts with my friends who studied energy and talk about biomass, right? We talk about where is carbon coming from. Don't pay attention to these numbers. This is actually from NASA, their example of where all the carbon on Earth and where it's coming from. So, carbon, we have our farms, right? So, on our farms, we have and we have human activity, human emissions, right? So, this is us in our cars. When I exhale, I'm releasing carbon dioxide. So we have human emissions, we have the carbon that we burn through our human activity. We have carbon in plants, stored carbon, right? So if we burn trees, that's also kind of human emissions. We have animals and livestock, they release carbon, right? Or other gases. I mean, cows release a lot of methane. So we have the carbon from plants. We have carbon emissions from um, human activity. We also have stored carbon in like our fossil fuels, right? Fossil carbon, this is what's dug. This is carbon in the soils. Um, through decomposition, when plants decompose dead matter, they're releasing carbon into the atmosphere. And then there's also in the ocean, there's oxygen is released in the ocean, right, from water vapor. We get oxygen in the air, but we also there's also stored carbon in sediments of the ocean, right? So when you think people are like digging for oil, the oil refineries that are out in the sea, especially all along like the Gulf Coast, you have a lot of oil refineries. Um, that's stored sediments and stored carbon. All right, so that's kind of like a It's kind of like a more scientific version of it, but it kind of just shows you where the carbon is going, right? Carbon's coming from the air, going into the plants, gets stored, right? Fossils over the air is decayed matter. And what's released is through respiration. We have carbon going in, carbon going out. And we have a lot of it stored in the atmosphere. And then there's this gas exchange that's occurring of dead matter also being decayed in the water and the oceans and getting released. All right. So there's this gas exchange both on land and sea. We won't really worry about this. What we'll worry about here is that we have oxygen that enters from the water. And, nope. Okay. So on our picture, so it's kind of a general version or more specific version of the carbon cycle. So what are we going to draw? We're going to draw some fun pictures. All right, so I am going to first draw, in my opinion, one of the biggest culprits to the carbon cycle, and that is yours truly. That's us. We are the culprits to the carbon cycle. So I'm going to have my grass, my little farm. Hold my paper down. There we go. You guys can see what I'm doing. All right. Now, in the distance, I'm going to have my city. Here's my city. This is San Francisco. We have our roads and our highways. These are our roads and our highways, where we're going. And my little car. My artist. I'm sure there's many artists who can draw much better cars than I. Our exhaust. Make sure we get that. I'm going to draw my little city. My version of the San Francisco skyline. All right, we'll do our detailed star pictures later. So from our in our car, we have our gas emissions. I'll fix my arrow after, but we have CO2, right? And the CO2 comes from human activity. All right, so we have human activity, and we're a big culprit to the carbon emissions. We have, and then we'll put here in our forests and our trees. So again, I'm going to draw my vascular tree. And I also have draw my... That is absolutely not right. I'm trying to draw cow people. So, my artists out there, I'm sure somebody can draw a much better one than I can. I'll paint those in later. I don't know how many udders a cow has. I'm sure there's some people who have cows. You can inform me how many udders cows have. And our animals also breathe. So they're releasing CO2. And also from here, we could probably just add right. There's also CO2 being released from decomposed matter. Now we also have people. If you know how to draw a person, go for it. I am not as fortunate. So I'm going to draw my... and I am releasing CO2 when I breathe. I made that a bit too thick, so I'm going to fix my arrow. When I exhale, I release CO2. And I reset and fix it. All right, and then all right, so I'm actually going to pause this here. I'm going to color in this picture, and then we'll go through and show how the oxygen is exchanged through all of this. Oh, and we have the oceans. Let's put, we'll say oceans are here. Because oceans put oxygen into the air as well. All right, so I'm going to pause this. I'm going to color it in and then go through and explain the rest. So in our carbon cycle drawing, we want to, I just colored all of it in. We'll just go through the rest of it. So we have our human activity, our animals, and me, right? Because I also, besides from me driving and all the fossil fuels that we release from our daily lives, we're also constantly breathing out carbon dioxide. Now, all that carbon dioxide, that's up in our atmosphere, it's up in our air. The trees, right, absorb that CO2 and they release oxygen. And I also put our oceans releasing oxygen. We release, the tree releases the oxygen and our animals breathe it in and I breathe it in. We breathe it in, right? For my gentleman or whoever, let's just, you don't need to be gender specific. Could have drawn a gender neutral stick figure, but it was easier that way. All right, so look at the picture. Make sure we kind of understand the exchange of gases, right? The amount of carbon we emit, and hopefully from this, you can see that the oxygen produced and our primary oxygen producers come from the trees. And so it's important to keep in mind that when there's so much carbon being released and only so much oxygen is coming out, that's why we have higher amounts of carbon dioxide in our atmosphere sometimes, which leads to, our current climate crisis of global warming. All right, so here's your picture. Kid, pause it, look at it, make sure we get all of our points in for the carbon cycle. So overall, I hope you guys see the pattern of understanding this whole picture of the types of plants. We have vascular and non-vascular plants. Both of them conduct photosynthesis because they are green and they have there are chloroplasts inside the plant cells. I just realized I did not draw the chloroplasts inside our plant cell. So, good thing we're correcting going through this. So, draw it real quick. If you ever see pictures, the reason why plant cells are more squamous or square, it's because they have an extra cell wall, cellulose, which is actually something that we can't. And inside here are our chloroplasts. So sorry, I did not put that in last time. That's where photosynthesis is occurring in our plant cell. So we have photosynthesis occurring inside our leaves, in both vascular and non-vascular plants because they are both green. It's just that the vascular plant has more vascular tissues of xylem and phloem to, one, support it, and two, to help transport the materials. Whereas non-vascular plants, they're just absorbing, kind of like a sponge, right? A sponge absorbs water and then releases it. The oxygen gets released. And from what our plant produces, we also have an exchange of gases in our atmosphere and on our planet between carbon dioxide and oxygen, with the big thing to keep in mind that there is more carbon being released due to human activity when only so much oxygen is put into the planet. All right, my friends, I hope you enjoyed this wonderful science drawing experience with yours truly. Have a great day.